Hello, pod fans. Are you ready to rock and roll? Welcome to the
Whoa.
395th episode of The Crate and Crowbar, a podcast about gaming. On the date that we're recording this, it is Thursday, 24th of March, space year 2022. I'm Alex Wiltshire, and I'm joined by Tom.
Hello.
My brain's gone.
Are you okay, Alex? Is everything all right? That's the highest energy intro to a podcast.
That was really over-ambitious, wasn't it?
That was a lot, yeah.
Oh,
I don't think I can keep up with that pace, though.
And who's that? That must be Marsh Davis.
It is Marsh
venerable Marsh Davis.
Oh, God. I need to go and lie down.
That's it now, yeah.
We've peaked.
We've peaked. No, I think we can sustain this because we've got quite a few cool games to talk about this evening.
Yes.
I've been playing the one that you two have been playing more than I've been playing it. It's Elden Ring, the game that can only be talked about now.
You mean it can only be talked about exclusively, or we're only allowed to talk about it now?
No, there's been a government law passed.
It's the only one that can be spoken about.
Yeah, and it's only during March 2022, space year 2022.
I've put like a bunch of hours in since I last sort of like chimed in with an opinion, but I believe Marsh, you've put loads of time in as well. And I think I wonder what you think of it now after more time with it.
Well, I feel a bit bad about our demolition of it.
Yeah, we were quite mean about it.
Yeah, because whatever grapes or questions I have about it. Whatever grapes, I meant to say.
I like grapes. I like grapes as a term for this.
The low-hanging fruit made out of grapes. I'm having a tremendous time with it. That should have been stated up front at the last podcast.
Yeah.
And, however I feel about how it ranks in relation to other FromSoft games, I'd be pretty surprised if it wasn't, the best game I play this year. I kind of find it very difficult to even compare it with other FromSoft games in a weird way, because my experience of those previous games is just so rooted in the time that I played them, my expectations for them in that moment, and the novelty of them at that time. And I think just, Elden Ring has this tremendously hard task of trying to recapture that sense of novelty that I experienced the first time I encountered the bonfire system in Dark Souls. I mean, I did play it, play Demon Souls as well, but I quickly discarded that. So it was really Dark Souls for me that made that impression. And even then, only when Uncle Dickie took me through it by the hand. And so, likewise, just like the storytelling in Dark Souls, being so diffuse, and the specific story that it subverts, and how there's a lot of interesting things going on in that, and I feel like that's lightning. And to be fair to FromSoft, it does seem that they did manage to sort of bottle some of that and then reproduce it in Bloodborne, which didn't necessarily kind of infuse its mechanics with the same sort of necessity that Dark Souls setting provided. But it's one of the most exciting and vividly imagined worlds I think I've ever seen in a game. And just a brilliant, supremely literate game with a metaphysical economy that turns blood into this commodity with connotations of inheritance and purity and celestial horror. I mean, it's a game about whomping horrid dogs, but it's very clever about it. And so I wonder, can Elden Ring say anything more and more imaginatively than Dark Souls already did about like gods and mortals and all that stuff?
Can I put in a kind of a claim on that, which is from I've probably played it 10 hours. I've been enjoying it massively, but I just haven't had any time to really get into it properly. I did a really mad thing and started playing Bloodborne at the same time. I don't even know why I did this. And I'm doing really well in Bloodborne and really enjoying it, and better than I've done in the past. It's bizarre. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that I'm a bit of a noob, and I haven't really been following the Elden Ring kind of chatting. So this is kind of probably the obvious and been talked about by people, or I'm wrong. Like what I'm going to say now, you can probably discount because you either know it or I'm wrong. But can I say it anyway?
Go for it.
Of course.
We can always laugh at you afterwards. It's fine.
Yeah, this is good. Yeah. So attending your view of can it get to that same sense of bottled lightning as Dark Souls? I agree that it doesn't feel like it's as lyrical as Bloodborne and Dark Souls are. So so clever and erudite. But I'm really interested in the fact that it is a commentary on the open world, in the sense that it is fully aware that it wants you to go off in any direction and have an adventure, and to sometimes be overpowered for stuff and sometimes be totally underpowered for stuff, but the point being that you've been free to do that at any time, and you can always go in another direction. And the themes that I've been picking up so far from NPCs and conversations and text and stuff, which is, it seems to be all about a world in which, as a tarnished, I have a place and I'm meant to follow a single path. And there's a real sense of kind of aristocracy overall. There's a real sense of class and people being put in their place and having their lives, their destinies decided before them by the people in power, and there being lots of backbiting and stuff among all the noble people and so on. And for the commentary on that being the fact that it is an open world, I finding really interesting. The fact that there is a light system that's meant to be showing me, a light sort of pointer system, hint system telling me where I should go. But I quickly went off in a totally different direction and ended up not finding various things that I should have done really early on, because it kind of made things a bit harder for myself. But it didn't make the experience worse. It made it more exciting, and I absolutely loved discovering that I'd missed out stuff. And for me, that seems to be something in the way that Dark Souls was a commentary on the act of gaming, and so on and so on. Is that it? Do you recognize any of what I just said?
I think you're dead right. Yeah, I mean, I was going to answer my own question with a yes podcast voice. But I think you're exactly on the money with the way the open world is a part of the metaphor that it's going for. But I think it buries that stuff quite deep. Actually, I definitely didn't have that realization as quickly as you have. So, well done.
Thanks, man. Oh, I feel really good now.
That notion of destiny is essential to the themes of the game. It seems like to me, based on how far along I am in the story, like the idea that the Tarnished is destined for something according to a given cult, and that is then challenged later, and then actually you could join other groups that subverts the idea of the destiny that's presented to you, and you realize that it's all a kind of fiction. But at the same time, even though you're exploring this open world, you are being funneled down a series of boss fights as well. And that feels like where the sort of narrative, the interesting narrative tension is with the themes of the game versus what you actually need to actually execute to progress.
I mean, I feel like it's in that sense, it's saying quite a lot of the same things that Dark Souls said, even without the open world. In terms of whether you can question your destiny, whether you do have free will. What do you do when the gods themselves are sort of unfaithful, when they don't honor the faith that's invested in them, and what's the nature of like the heroic quest or heroic destiny in that context, when the gods themselves that are meant to bestow you this kind of grace, this kind of fate, are themselves, perverse or corrupted in some way.
Yeah,
and I think like I don't actually begrudge the fact that they're reiterating a lot of that stuff to a new and I assume hugely expanded audience. I think those are great meaty topics to get into, and I think it's worth doing them again. I don't mind. But at the same time, I think initially I wasn't as excited by revisiting those ideas, because the FromSoft games that I've loved have always tended to be very different in their kind of approach to these things. Like Bloodborne just has this completely different sort of metaphysical economy. But then the more I've been getting into Elden Ring, the more I see that it has its own very particular range of like metaphors that it's leaning on. Like the themes of joining and breaking seem to be incredibly important, like whether that's physically breaking apart or joining together actual people, with all the grafting of limbs and stuff, or whether that's just like making and breaking promises or vows, or breaking entire worlds. Like it feels like its central motif is one of schism.
Yeah, kind of unjoining of established culture. Like it's weird. Like one of the basic items you pick up when you're walking over ruins is like a ruin fragment, and it says that those ruins have actually fallen from the sky. And there's almost a kind of sense that there's been a giant collision of ideas and cultures that has rendered everything ruinous.
Right. Well, those schisms aren't just physical; they're schisms in faith as well. Like the entire world is divided not just into geographical fragments, but into combatant factions who have different ideas about how to restore the broken natural law of the world, or even what that natural law should be. Like whether the reality you live in should contain death or not is a matter of philosophical debate among the factions who have the power to make it so or make it not so. The more I get into it, there's so many exciting things in it, and I feel like I think this is true of all FromSoft games, but they start with this big, like big central theme, and then in a very kind of almost wordplay way, just refract that theme in every possible way through all the secondary characters and the passing characters whose stories you interact with. And like at the moment, I'm just really enjoying hoovering up like the plot lines of different passing characters and finding out, what's going on with them. I think one of the ideas that I'm getting to just now in my playthrough is sort of what it means to have a schism sort of within yourself. Like there are these characters whose allegiances or even parentage like pulls them in different directions, and there are characters who have been like literally divided body from soul in a sort of like kind of a whiff of Cartesian dualism going on there. But even then there's like a more striking element to that, which is that those two parts may end up wanting different things. And there are characters who are doubled or split in two, and their two halves end up working against each other. I think it's just it's just incredible that the number of different ways in which they've looked at the idea of sort of schism and applied it in all these different kinds of contexts of varying levels of philosophy or fantasy. I think even like the metaphor shift from souls to runes is interesting too. I originally at the beginning of the game I thought, oh, runes as a sort of like souls currency is just them accepting that it's a mechanic now and they don't really have an explanation for that. But actually, I think they do, guys, because I've thought about this too much. I think it's saying that like people, or at least like some elemental part of people, are runes in the sense that like the runes are also ideas that are used to shape the laws of reality, because the aim of the game is to collect these runes from these boss characters who are essentially emblematic of that idea that can then be embedded for better or worse in this one great ring which controls reality. And I guess this sort of like says in this fiction that like the essence of a person is almost ideology itself, or rather the people you meet aren't really people so much as like personifications of ideas, which then sort of, I mean, that feels so right in like not just Elden Ring, but Souls games in general, where people are just like driven and consumed by singular ideas a lot of the time. And then that has implications for free will, doesn't it? Because if you're literally, if you literally have your kind of reason to be written through you like a stick of rock, then you can't ever escape your destiny, can you? And then there are characters in this who are like inherently doomed in exactly that way, and no matter how they feel about it, they can't change their nature or their destiny.
I think
it's the whole good shit.
The whole construct of the demigod is like super important to the fantasy, in the sense that they've all inherited some aspect of a supposed divine power, but they're all fatally flawed in their different ways. And a lot of the factions sort of map their own ideology onto what they seem to represent within their culture. That's kind of like a highfalutin way of saying it, but it's sort of it's almost like there's so many. It's about the imperfection of the core belief, or a core text, and the fact that people could splinter and then map themselves onto these different demigods and support them, and then wage wars on their behalf, on just to pursue an aim that that's been described to them that is inaccurate. And there's no certainty in Elden Ring in terms of like who you choose to side with and what they represent. They're all wrong. It's all wrong, which is kind of a fatalism that did lie at the heart of Dark Souls as well. I think that the idea that that kind of the motivating ideologies that different demigods represent all end in ruin. And actually, like, pursuing those with that degree of fervor is a futile act. I think that's seems to be a core thing that's coming through the game for me, playing through it so far. I'm not at the end, so I don't know how this all turns out, or but there's not going to be a right answer to the Elden Ring. Like, it's very clear from the outset that it's a critique of idealism in a way, and always, like, I don't know, it feels like it dismantles the reasons why people go to war, for example. Is a thing that's just like undermined constantly, because there's a sense that when you encounter items and read through the kind of history of the place you're exploring, that no one has achieved anything through war. Really, like, at the end of the day, what it comes down to is are the kind of the demigods that hold the keys to a destiny, and none of them are like right or wrong. It's just a kind of chaotic situation where, like, the game invites you to side with some people. And actually, one of my frustrations with the game is that to get the most out of it, you sort of have to side with everyone without making a choice so far.
I came up against last night a character who kind of, you'll join me, and like you get this sort of yes no answer, and like I'm thinking, no, I don't want to, but I have a feeling that the story will end if I with you. It's almost like going to end if I say no. So it's yes, then
you lock off content for yourself. I think that's a genuine, like, a real criticism of the way the story is structured. And actually taking people out of the world is always the worst option so far. Like, even if you disagree with their take on the world, you have to sort of go with their quest line in order to further explore what the world is. If that makes sense. Is that idea of NPCs having to exist forever, because that robs you of all choice, really. Because, like, I'm always going to want to listen to more dialogue. I'm more like, I love these games. I love the lore. I love the kind of world building, and the more dialogue I can hear, I'm going to go for that option in spite of everything, which means that there's no real choice to what I'm doing narratively. Is that your guys' experience?
Yeah, I think in order to even understand what's going on, you need to kind of be a yes man to literally everybody, which feels wrong. But at the same time, you just need to do that in order to understand what people's positions are, so that you can ultimately reject them or not. But yeah, I was going to say, I was thinking, about the way in which a lot of the characters are inherently doomed because of their sort of, like, they are emblematic of an idea which they must pursue. I wonder if actually the tarnished are essentially exempt from that. Like, the role of the player is one which has complete free will, despite everybody telling you that you have this particular kind of destiny. In fact, you don't. Like, you are one of the only kind of beings in this universe which is completely without grace, without the interference of God. And you've been, the tarnished have been banished from the world of gods for time immemorial. I wonder if that sort of explains the player's ability to have agency at all.
The player has the right to be the ultimate hypocrite in every dramatic situation.
That is interesting, though. That kind of distinction for what the Tarnished are, that does play into what I've been thinking about in terms of its commentary on one's place in this universe. In this place, that you are told by everybody that you're meant to do a set of things in the way a game says you're meant to do this and then this and then this, and there is one path through, but you're walking through a world in which you can walk in any direction, and the Tarnished kind of that reading of what a Tarnished is kind of supports your actual role in the game, or at least what I think the game wants you to think is your natural place in this world.
But I do agree that there's a sort of inherent fragility to the narrative within the open world, which means a lot. It's very easy to miss these stories or find them just broken. Like, and I'm now, as you can tell, overly invested perhaps in keeping track of this stuff. But there's like this father-daughter relationship which was kind of important to me to follow, and yet I have obviously missed some major beats in the middle of it, and the game is just carried on, and the characters are referencing certain events as though I know what they are, and even I can ask questions about those events, and I simply do not know what they are. And I feel that's not intended. And that feels like a shame. And I think that's the difficulty in managing what players have been exposed to and when is definitely made worse by the open world. I think it was possible to miss stuff in the obviously in all the previous Dark Souls games, but it's sort of magnified here. I think it's true of the mechanical elements as well. And the game is obviously willfully opaque about certain pretty basic things, and I appreciate that there's an intended level of mischief there. To some extent, I don't mind Hidetaka Miyazaki, the Joker god, chuckling away when players miss a bit of functionality that somehow makes the game 10 times harder. But I also think that the result of that in a game this broad is an incredibly unmodulated, almost random experience at times. And I think that changes and it diminishes in some ways what each area represents in terms of difficulty or threat or meaning, or even your engagement with it. And the sort of jest of that is that it feels very unintended. So for example, I'd say the past 15 hours or so, a substantial chunk of time, I haven't really known where to go. And everywhere I have been has either been just an absolute stomp for me, where I've been just annihilating everything by my mere presence, or it's been prohibitively beyond my current level, and there's almost nothing in the middle. And that just doesn't feel like it can be what was in the mind of the designer. And then at one point, I just went into this random cave, not at all signposted at all by the game, referenced anywhere as I could find out, and I fought a boss in there. I got an item from them, and now I have infinite access to items that were previously extremely scarce. And the result is an instantaneous raising of my damage output to at least 150% of what it was.
Right.
And also loads of other builds are now viable to me because I can upgrade all kinds of items. And that's fun. I'm amused now just to tonk enemies who look at me wrong, but it also feels very undesigned, perhaps not quite as gratifying in the sort of the rich sort of measured way that progress in other Souls games is meted out. It just doesn't. If you enter a new area and you just plow through it, you fail to engage to some degree with what that place is saying. And if the sort of the mise en scène of a boss encounter is trying to instill awe or fear in me, and I just nobble them in 2 hits, I feel like something has been lost. Even though as a scrub, I really appreciate being able to get through things. Something has been missed, and previous from soft games are pretty carefully stage managed in some of that, in some ways that this game can't quite be. But I think there's still a net benefit to the open world.
I think that's
majestic.
I think that whether this is good or not, I I don't think I can judge at this point, but I get the feeling that they're fully aware of that experience. I think, going back to your point about the frustration of not being able to coherently follow some of the narratives, and I'm sure there's an element of bugginess going on. I think there was an update last night that fixed various sort of questy things that that it sounded like that story that you told might have caused that. But on top of that, I do get the feeling that the game doesn't expect you to be completionist. And it's funny, actually, I think that completionism feels like a topic that FromSoft would probably get right on top of, to kind of, why do you want to see everything, and why do you want to say yes to everything when you also don't want to say yes to everything? Just do what that feels like something they would play around with. But I think that they, and I think that that unevenness, I think that is, if not designed, is certainly something that they would be aware of, or and think that this is what we have made. By making an open world game, we have lifted our hands up a little bit from the responsibility of managing every part of the curve that they did in Dark Souls and whatever. And I think that there's lots of stuff in some of the comment, in some of the theming that seems to sort of, things are hard, things are easy. It's been your story. But I'm at this stage in the game where I'm not getting frustrated by that, because I haven't really faced it yet, because I'm still I still look like a fucking peasant with a stupid hat and a rotting fucking top. And I'm really frustrated about it. So I haven't found any fucking good clothes. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm being a bit devil's advocate here, but I think I'd be surprised if there wasn't an element of, hey, relax into it, everyone, or at least let's explore the idea of being completionist or wanting everything to be perfect, modulated and everything.
Well, I suppose there's an element where they just don't have a choice to do that, right?
Yeah, and I think that anyone smart making an open world game, that's something that you think about really early on. That's why I can't think that that's a mistake. But like I said, whether it's good or not is another matter.
It's kind of interesting being halfway through it and not having the kind of overview of the game that we have of Bloodborne and Dark Souls, for example. Like those games took a while for me to like emerge, like the messages that they were trying to, the themes they were trying to explore. Like you could just play through and bash all the bosses and not think about anything, but then it sits with you for a while, and then you watch YouTube videos perhaps like about the lore and actually get more, like there's something there, like a kernel of something that's quite fascinating. I think Bloodborne is exceptional for this, given obviously it's hugely inspired by Lovecraft, but their translation of that into environments, like environment design, and the way that you can get sucked into nightmares, etc., and into places that are kind of wrenched out of time and space, like a university hall or something like that. Those ideas are just amazing and really super well executed in that game. And though I've seen loads of great stuff in Elden Ring, I'm kind of like, it's unfair to really compare them because they're such different games. But do you guys think that like the great imagination that's gone into the enemy design and the environment design in Elden Ring kind of comes across in the open world in the same way that it does from other games?
Maybe not. I mean, Bloodborne is like par excellence.
Yeah.
It's hard to compare anything to that. I do think there are elements to the design of this world which set it apart from just being sort of like rote fantasy place.
Yeah, for sure.
And there's definitely individual storylines within this which are really fascinating and quite powerful as well. I dare say, like there's actual kind of tragedy in this, which when you unpick, it actually got to me in a way. There's also there's also a sort of like thread line through it. I don't want to spoil anything, but there's a storyline in this which is probably one of the darkest storylines I think in any Souls game, in a kind of grim and implied sexual way. And I found that actually too dark, even for a game in a world this kind of corrupted or demented. I thought that was a bit just icky, frankly. Sorry, yeah, I didn't answer your question. I just went down a rabbit hole. Sorry.
I think that from my experience so far, I've really enjoyed the sense of seeing NPCs and creatures engaging in activities in kind of in a space which kind of makes sense, like, you know, the way that you get sort of zombie characters kind of gathered around those big fallen ruined bits of masonry, obviously mining them or gathering stuff from them, with these overseers with them, and there's a road with a massive giants pulling a cart, you know, like a carriage along a road, and they will progress along that road, which would be impossible to stage in Dark Souls or any of the former games, because their areas are smaller, and the way that you encounter them is, you know, following the road that they will be walking along, you know, later on. So where are they going? Oh, they're going up the road where I've come from, and you know, those sorts of things are very naturally, you know, part of the experience of being there. I think I've also really enjoyed the sense of you know, coming up to a really horrible fucking bog, a dark foresty bog thing, and being told that I've got to cross it to get to something that I know is on the other side, and you've got to go through, and feeling that that's a journey I'm taking, and it's me that's taking it. And, you know, that sense of geography and self-determination doesn't really exist in the former games, because you're on a linear path in those ones, and you know, where the joy of them is in their intricacy, you know, and understanding, you know, how a switchback kind of enables, you know, shortcuts and all those kinds of things. You know, that is a real joy, but it's a different kind of joy to know that you're going to be going along this path on a journey that you chose, and for the geographic places you go between making geographic sense. That's cool, and I think it uses it a lot.
Can we talk about Tunic?
Yeah.
Because that is a game with switchbacks and then some.
God.
I picked up Tunic thinking that it would be a kind of cutesy way to diffuse the tension of Elden Ring, like something knockabout and jolly. But actually, it's a lot harder than Elden Ring. I find it incredibly frustrating, actually.
There's something about the rhythm of fighting. I just can't get it. It's weird, very odd.
Yeah, if I'm honest, I found it quite annoying. But like, it looks so lovely. You're this cute little fox wearing Link's clothes in every sense, because this is just like a out and out homage to old school Zelda games. Although here it's not 2D, it's this gorgeously rendered sort of isometric 3D. Everything looks like these kind of crisp paper crafted polygons. And it's just a lovely environment to be in, or it would be. But for the fact that exploring it is just like an absolute fucking mnemonic nightmare. I cannot fix this place in my brain at all. Like, so the isometric viewpoint is just used absolutely continuously. I mean continuously, as like a means of obscuring things, like vital equipment, shortcuts, or even like the intended route forward. Like every area you're in has 3 ways out of it, and you know, just making it kind of really difficult to kind of map mentally. And there's no indication of any order in which you'd explore them. And then a lot in addition to those 3 directions that you just have to randomly pick one of, there are like usually maybe 3 other shortcuts hidden from view. Like every single screen of the game just has this level of density, which I find to be quite paralyzing. And it's just and like stuff is just hidden behind the geometry. as though that's an interesting design choice. I'm not sure it is. Like maybe like in olden school games, maybe you would walk up to a boulder and you'd be able to go behind it unexpectedly, and that would be like an Easter egg or like a super secret. But like this is just a matter of course about how this world is organized. Like everything is behind something, and your character just becomes a silhouette, and you can walk this unseen path. And like some of it makes sense, like you're walking behind a waterfall or something. But other bits of it is just like it just feels obscure. And I don't know that. I don't know. Am I being really curmudgeonly here? But like, I feel like I just doesn't take any brilliance on my part to find it, because now I'm just nosing into every fucking corner in the game, and like either I don't find anything and I'm annoyed, or I do find something and it's just like, oh well, okay, well then of course it was there.
I mean, I don't. I mean, I totally recognise what you're saying, and I don't agree. I mean, I do, but I definitely find it very hard to remember my way around. I found a shop. I definitely remember going to a shop because I remember buying some dynamite at the shop. I can't remember where the shop is. I had loads of money, and I can't remember how to get more dynamite because dynamite was great. I mean, and yes, like there are so many things hidden behind bits of geometry. However, I don't think there's been anything behind bits of geometry which have been either super useful, like most of it's just money, but chests with money in it. I don't think any of the kind of more important stuff like upgrade materials and things like that have been behind those sorts of things. And the really kind of surprising one. So what this game will do is you'll go on excursion from these shrine things, which are the equivalent of its Dark Souls bonfires. There's something where you reset and regenerate all your health and whatnot, and you'll go out into the world and you'll explore forward and you have a load of fights and you'll slowly run out of health, and rather than while it does have some bridges and things that you'll be able to knock down and lay down from the opposite side, therefore opening a shortcut in a fairly Dark Soulsy way, in some cases you'll get to an end of a path and then you'll find a secret kind of passage that is more evident from that end, which takes you all the way back to the bonfire that you were at, the shrine that you were at. And you realize that shortcut has been there all along, if you knew about it. And that makes me feel, on one hand, oh, and on the other hand, fuck's sakes, I didn't need to do any of the work if I just kind of explored every corner. It's a really strange decision. And it seems to be bound up in the determination of the level designers to squeeze everything they possibly can out of every square meter of the game world, where you'll kind of go off and play for half an hour and turn around on yourself and go back and go forth and end up like in this sort of small valley right by where you started, which you can't access because you can't fall off stuff in this game. Like you'll come up to a cliff and you can't fall off it. So it's totally inaccessible, but you realize that they've just squeezed everything in, and it does make the world really hard to remember. It's very tortuous. However, have you, Marty, how have you got on with which I think the thing that I think is just the coolest thing about this game, the manual and the maps within?
Yes. Well, I see. I really like the obscurantism in other ways. Like I like the fact you pick up items you don't really know what they do, and I like the fact that you pick up these pages of the game's own manual, which is a weird bit of fourth wall breaking. But it's this beautifully laid out document that harkens back to the kind of NES era of these sorts of pamphlets. And then a lot of that is written in an unknown language as well, which feels quite like Fez, I suppose. But
it's very
although I would say that Fez, although Fez doesn't conceal any of its core systems in the way that this game does, which I find to be slightly frustrating.
How do you mean? How do you mean by conceal?
Well, I mean, like what basic items do is sometimes written in in the mystery language, and you can infer what it does later. Whereas I don't think.
I think mostly though you get quite explicit instructions later on in the manual.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think this stuff is really cool. And I love the way it looks. But I think I'd be more into it if I didn't find the world itself to be this memorization challenge, which I don't like. I don't think I feel like my trust has been burnt a little bit, and I think I'd find some of the broader puzzle aspects more engaging if I felt like the memorization challenge was right for me, or if I felt like the combat design was precise or interesting. And I don't know. How do you feel about the combat? I'm not really jived with that either, I have to say.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't feel great about it. So this is the combat. Is. I mean, it doesn't involve many buttons, but you once you get a shield, you can hold a shield up in a kind of quite Dark Soulsy kind of way. Your sword that you get a little bit into the game, has a 3-hit combo thing, and that's about as kind of finessed as it is. And so, what I think that what and there's a dodge roll kind of thing and a stamina system. It's also very familiar stuff to Dark Souls stuff, but the rhythm, I just don't get it. So for example, after there's a gap of there's a sort of like a pause between finishing a strike on the sword and being able to raise your shield. So for example, there are these laser kind of creature like roboty things, and they'll shoot sort of in sort of bolts of 4 bolts, and then there's a pause, and then it does it again. And the rhythm of getting your shield up to kind of to defend yourself while it's shooting, it's just I just kept getting shot at because there's this gap, after making a strike before the shield is fully raised. But there are some other bits and pieces going on. For example, if you use up all of your stamina, you take way more damage than you do when you don't have any stamina, or when you do have stamina. And there are, you're unable to do the full dodge roll, so you kind of aren't really allowed to run out of stamina in the middle of a fight. But then, of course, you do. You kind of spam it a little bit, and it's finicky. It's the balance between finickiness and simplicity in it, which I have not really got a handle on. That's a bit rambly, that answer, but yeah, I haven't got a handle on it.
That stacks up with my impression of it. I just don't necessarily trust that it's working quite as hoped, because there's like you say, like with the those laser enemies that are obviously designed for you to block with a shield and then hit when they finish firing the laser.
Yeah.
There's just something about that rhythm which feels off.
Yeah.
And even other like early enemies who have these just sword and shield wielding enemies, it's really easy for both of you to hit each other and knock each other just out of range of each other.
Yes.
And you kind of constantly have to be kind of sluggishly walking back into range and then attacking.
But then what
There's
happens
just
is then it's got its shield back up again. And so by the time you get into striking, it's got its shield back on and you can't get it. And then by hitting its shield, then you're pushed back again. And now you're in this rhythm of not being able to close range to actually strike it when it's yeah.
Is that intended?
I
just
don't
don't know.
feel it is. I don't feel it is because it's not fun. I mean, I enjoyed. I must admit, I'm enjoying the exploration aspect of it. With a little bit of a sort of sense of anxiety about knowing whether I'd ever better find my way back again. But actually, I think a lot of the paths are quite linear. Actually, they just feel incredibly tortuous.
I think the problem is it encourages you to look for hidden paths all the time because there are chests and items that are always hidden. And so if you end up looking in every corner, you often find the shortcuts that you're meant to find in the other direction.
Some of those shortcuts. I
found loads of them, and it puts you into areas that are presumably meant to be explored in exactly the opposite direction, and the rhythm of them just feels off as a result of that.
Yeah. So I'm playing it. I'm playing it like a dumbass, you see, and I'm not bothering trying to find shit because I found that like the chests that are hidden, they just got a load of money in them, whatever. I was actually getting really frustrated that I kept getting rewarded with a load of money, and it's like whatever. But then, of course, then I picked up a manual piece which explained how the upgrade system works. And then I realized I needed all the money I could possibly get to do all the upgrading that I could do.
There are some interesting accessibility settings, actually. I don't know if you check this out, but you
No.
can there's no sort of overall kind of difficulty slider, but you can give yourself infinite stamina, for example, or you can
Oh.
just turn off death altogether.
Oh.
You just your health goes down, but you never die. But I've tried that a little bit, but I think actually uh, that actually even more breaks the the game, because, well, for one thing, it doesn't necessarily make combat more fun just because it's unfadable, but it also robs you of that already quite minimal sense of where you're meant to be going, because, like, sometimes the game will put prohibitively dangerous enemies in your
Yeah.
path, but actually once you become unkillable, you can get past them, and
Yes.
then you're experiencing things out of like a designed order.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if I'll play it more, actually, because I just ditched it and went back to Elden Ring.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, if I wasn't playing Elden Ring in the living room, which keeps getting claimed by my children, then I'd probably be more frustrated. But I'm actually enjoying it, and kind of posturing along on it has been fun. I mean, I personally, have really. It's not actually something that I did experience in my actual life, but I did kind of like the fantasy of, the import gamer of the 1990s, who, you'd get a game that you could not really understand. It's clear that this game is kind of conjuring that sort of that nostalgia. You get a game that you don't understand what's happening because it's in Japanese, and the manual is also in Japanese, but it has these odd sort of lines of Roman in it, Roman text, which in English that you can understand. And what on earth is what earth is going on, and the act of playing is not only just to play the game but also to understand it. I think that's that hits various nostalgic buttons in it. I don't think it's particular. I think it's cleverly done. I don't think it's a clever sort of creative choice.
Right, because it's reproducing mechanics
It's just
that you
nostalgia.
might have nostalgia for, but were probably poorly QA'd at
Well,
the time.
I think more than that, it is like literally you bought a Japanese game, so no, you don't understand what it is. But yeah, I think that it's really cleverly done. I think that the manual is beautifully produced, because they're using that sort of Japanese kind of Roman font that you see, which is no Western fonts. It's kind of serifed, and sort of the letter shapes are sort of different, and it really stands out to me. And there's a sort of made up script. There's even like a CMYK dot that you can make out when you zoom in on the pages. And the way that I used to love Nintendo instruction books for the little diagrams of kind of Link sort of going in to strike something, it's just illustrating these little things, which, when you tie that with the little kind of pixely character that you see on the screen, just kind of like, oh, that's what's going on. That's what they look like. And, it invites you to imagine a bit harder about what's happening, in the simplicity of the screen. That, again, this is all just dumb nostalgia, but I'm finding it sort of quite cathartic and sort of soothing.
Try fingers butthole is what I say to Tunic. Talking of manuals, Tom, do you prefer manuals or automatics?
Oh, that's good.
Oh my
goodness.
Really, you've been playing Gran Turismo.
I've been playing a video game about the cars. The ones you see outside your windows, going up and down the place. And I've been playing Gran Turismo 7, and this is my first proper Gran Turismo experience. And I thought I would impart a bit of how it is, what it's been like as a person who knows fucking nothing about cars. So first thing I'd say is, like, my friends, I'm dangerously close to having opinions about cars now.
Oh my god.
And this is like like a kind of 180 personality sort of turn. So I just wanted to sort of like flag this as a kind of warning flag for what might come next. And for the next bit, I'm not at all bragging on people who really enjoy cars. It's a really and motorsport as well. Like people just love that hobby and love just getting into tooling up cars and stuff. I am an oblivious idiot in that world. Like just to sort of like situate myself. But Gran Turismo 7 has an infectious enthusiasm for the car as a cultural artifact, almost a driving force that has pushed civilization forwards. There's a kind of like there's a tone to Gran Turismo 7, the way it applies everyday cars. The way it sort of like frames them is that so the best way to describe it is to describe the opening sequence where it opens up and it's like a sort of documentary feel, and it's the first car was made, and then it's something about the Wright brothers making a plane.
They made a plane. That wasn't a car.
No, this is the whole sort of like the way that Gran Turismo kind of imbues the car with a sense of just transcendental importance. Is the way is that it brings in all acts of engineering and relates them to cars as a kind of way of making you really kind of appreciate the cars that you're collecting. And it's fundamentally a game about racing cars, obviously around the circuits, but secondary to that, and progression is about collecting cars, and the cars are beautifully realized and incredibly accurate. They're either scans of the actual cars themselves, or they've been supplied actual CAD kind of versions of the cars by the manufacturers themselves. Like it's like the materials inside, the fidelity, so much care has gone into worshipping these good cars, and I think I like the cars. And kind of what's interesting about it is that Gran Turismo, there's not a huge amount of like sort of, for example, cars don't tend to get damaged in races because I think there are a lot of kind of requirements from production, from the licenses that they're perhaps like using to actually put these cars in the game, that no one wants to see a wrecked Porsche, right? No one wants to see like a wrecked Alfa Romeo if you're working for those companies. And there's a kind of very bizarre standoffish relationship between how people actually race in video games versus that compulsion to keep these cars pristine and looking amazing in every single replay. And to that extent, like I find it like a really fascinating game. It's a very, very good racing game. Like it's really like the cars feel genuinely like really different. Whether you're driving like a pickup truck or whether it's like a engine at the front or engine at the back, 4-wheel drive, rear wheel drive, like they all feel like really significantly different. So my most powerful car technically is like a Camaro, which is just a really fast piece of shit. It goes very, very fast in straight lines, but can't actually navigate a course properly. And it's the whole game is about navigating those built-in kind of like you sort of like, it's hard to describe. You're navigating the flaws of the machine that you've been assigned as a part of a massive marketing exercise to get you to collect all the cars from the deals that have presumably been made between the producer of Gran Turismo and all of the car manufacturers. There's a sort of palace for all the cars, which links
Palace
into
of the cars.
So you select Ford, for example, or Alfa Romeo or Mercedes, and you go in there, and it's got all of the cars there on show, meticulously modelled. And then if you tap across, there's like an in-stream link to YouTube videos showing the cars as well, and also some manufacturers design cars for Gran Turismo, like fictional cars that might exist as kind of futuristic visions of what a Mercedes-Benz in 2050 might look like, and that's kind of in the game. And they've got a documentary that's linked up to as part of all of that. It's an extraordinary marketing exercise for all of these massive cars. And yet, what kind of makes it really appeal to me is the extraordinary kind of like mundanity of it. Like it's that you're driving real cars around real tracks. Most of the tracks are real, I think, and you'll be driving a Peugeot in the drizzle, and it's very sort of unglamorous in a way that I didn't expect from Gran Turismo, given my experiences with like Forza Horizon, for example. I love the Horizon series. I think they're great, and they've honed that formula to almost perfection. Those are just like you race through extraordinary, beautiful environments in these souped-up cars that don't really exist, but they're kind of equivalents to real-world versions. But here I'm just kind of like in Italy driving a Renault, racing a Renault against other Renaults around quite a boring track. And there's something like actually quite endearing about the fact that it doesn't model the cars in their best light ever. The result of that is that my partner Emma walked in just earlier this evening, and she thought I was watching a real race when actually what was on the screen was a replay of the race I'd just done. The fidelity is extraordinary. The fact that it also models just boring, drizzly days as almost a norm is kind of sets it apart from other really fantasist driving sims like Dirt 5 and like Forza Horizon, who sort of try to sell you very hard a kind of loud fantasy about what it's like to drive an amazing car and win things. And actually, Gran Turismo is just quietly happy to just plop you on a circuit in a really ordinary hatchback and let you just slosh around on a shitty, drizzly track. And I actually really like that about it. Like, the tagline for the game is the real driving simulator. Like, actually, part of that is actually just a total lack of glamour. Like,
it should have been slosh around on a shitty, drizzly track. Put that on posters.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know why I like that so much. But
I totally agree with you. Like I am, because I think that's so Forza Horizon, a lot of modern driving games, they need you to love them very early on. So they give you this kind of introductory sequence where you get to drive some of the best cars in the game in the kind of most exciting environment you possibly can. But then once you're into the game proper, you're still driving fast cars. It's not like it's a massive step down. Whereas Gran Turismo starts you at the very bottom, and always did. Like I was obsessed. I don't really like that term. I really loved the first and second. I played them, when they came out, and I absolutely love the progression of slowly getting faster and faster. Within each car. So the old, like, it was the first driving game that had kind of this sense of RPG about it, where you started in your damp Peugeot and you would soup it up a little bit as far as you could, and then you would earn enough money to get a better car, and you get a better car. And by the end, you really did understand the difference between rear wheel driving cars, front, engines in the front, engines in the back, engines in the mid. It's really, you feel that you've earned the ability to drive its best cars, and you're actually able to, because you've really fucking learned. But it's taken, it took a long time to get to that stage. I don't think a modern racing game could do that. I certainly would be afraid to do that.
This one does do that for sure. Again, it starts you just driving everyday road cars that you would see walking out on the street every day, and they handle like shit on a racing course because they're not designed for that. And then you slowly build up, and I've realized like there is a skill gap when it comes to driving like super crazy fast cars, where actually you need to be way more careful with braking zones and stuff in a way that you just didn't have to worry about when you were driving, a Ford Fiesta or something, or a Mini around a track. The fact that there's such a kind of difference in feel in terms of the way that the cars are built and the way they move, and the fact that there is that difference between the way the cars are built. So these cars are like avatars, basically. I hate to evoke the drivatar thing, but in terms of like the ability of the vehicle you're in a racing game is basically how you express yourself in the virtual environment, and it feels so finely tuned and carefully thought about in terms of how each avatar feels, that there is just a huge depth. Even at like, I've got most of the assists on, and I still feel that things are different with different cars, and there's personality, almost mechanical personality, to how those cars operate on the track, and that is just excellent. Like, even as someone who like doesn't really care about cars, the fact that I've managed to kind of capture something from the game about how they operate differently, it is to its credit for sure. Like, it means that they just must have such good driving models, and the fact that I like care about my Camaro, even though it's rubbish, but very good in a straight line. It's kind of a credit to the amount of research and kind of work that's gone into representing each type of thing, like a pickup truck versus a hatchback versus a muscle car versus a NASCAR oval ring racer. Like, all those things are modeled within this one game, and I just think that's kind of quite an achievement, even though I don't fully understand the actual cars involved. So I just sort of wanted to celebrate it a bit, really. And the fact that it does plonk you on a grey track, and I've watched the replays like for most of my races because
nice. I'm glad that still has some
beautifully
kind of
modelled.
feel to it, because that was the thing with kind of PlayStation, just watching these shiny things going around track, and then it was just the sheer spectacle of it. But I'm glad that it still has a bit of power to it still.
Yeah, it's still good. I think what I would say is that its take on cars generally is a bit pompous. Well, very pompous, I would say. In the sense that they're held up as being a kind of like crux of civilization. And so, for example, if you leave the game idle, it will show you a series of screens that announce announce various historical events, and then it shuffles car facts in among those events, just to kind of establish the fact that cars are as important as the fall of the Berlin Wall or the emergence of COVID. Both of those slides exist.
Really? Did it? It's done COVID.
Yes.
Oh no.
Yes. Yeah, and it's got like it flashes up, and there's a picture of the virus under a microscope.
Oh no.
And it says, "Oh, it's this date 2020 discovered here. This is where the pandemic was discovered." And then there'll be another one that's like about World War II or something.
Also,
and then in between those,
Peugeot really fast.
exactly right. Yeah, and in the middle it would be like, "Oh, Ford invented the production line." It's like, no, those things are not
It didn't, by the way. That was, the production line was already a concept by the time.
Yeah, that's another thing about the game, where given that it is a marketing exercise and they obviously have huge access to the cars themselves, it sort of pushes out stuff into like, there's a huge amount of text in this game about like what the car is and what it represents, and even just given parts that you can use to upgrade the car. And I've no idea what's marketing and what isn't. Like, it's really utterly unclear. Like, as far as I'm concerned, like the manufacturers wrote everything. Like, I don't know. And that's kind of like an awkward thing about the game, even though like I think it's a really complete package as a racing game, and I really enjoy it. I find it slightly uncomfortable as a kind of thing that as a marketing tool, like in terms of like, I think we deserve to know when a thing has been sponsored, when we're shown it in the game, and when we're watching a video in the game about that particular product. I think like we deserve to know when that's been paid for and when it hasn't. And I'd be very curious to interrogate that about.
Yeah, it's weird to think like which way round does it go? Because on one hand, these cars are giving the game content, and it's important to a lot of people that the cars are accurate, right, and that they're real world things, and they have the car that they might own or want to own. On the other hand, yeah, it is a marketing device, and BMW, is probably does well out of the fact that its cars are presented nicely in this game. Like everybody wins, so maybe no money changes hands because it's mutually kind of productive,
beneficial. But then, I think there are many blurred lines around this presentation of the cars. Like, so for example, what if there's a bit of text about a Ford hatchback that says it's shit, right? Like, is that at the behest of a competitor, or is that honestly the opinion of someone in the production studio? There's no way to know. And they're talking about like real world purchases, like real world products that could be purchased for everyday life, and there's no sense that like you have to relay. For example, like there are companies, as I said earlier, that created these sort of space age cars versions of their brand that like might theoretically perhaps exist in the future that you might be able to drive in the game. I don't see any sponsorship warnings around that. Like, not warnings, but like any sort of information about like whether they get more cars in the game because of their relationship with the game. Whether like a particular companies get more a high value kind of exposure, and whether their cars get more exposure. It just feels like as great a game as it is. I think as a marketing tool, it's a quite obscure and difficult thing. But yeah, perhaps it's always been so. Alex, I know you played the first ones.
Yeah, I mean, I think I recognize all of those things from the earlier games. I mean, I suppose I don't really like personally. I don't really care. I really like driving games, and I kind of like just the aesthetic appeal of a fine car. But I also couldn't give a shit about cars, and I don't care about the industry. So therefore, hey, maybe in an editorial sense, Peugeot is being overexposed, but I also don't give a shit. It's like, fuck, it's just fucking Peugeot, isn't it? I mean, I personally find the worst thing for me is the fact that cars are pretty bad. They're bad things. They're horrific for the environment. They kill pedestrians. They kill their drivers and passengers. They fuck up urban space. They just fuck up everything. And yes, they also allow you to get about, put the shopping in them and shit. You also get to drive really fast in them, and it's fun. But yeah, that's the tension in it for me.
I feel like Forza Horizon and other racing games I've really enjoyed, and Burnout the series back in the day, like those were just kind of about the thrill of going fast in a thing and sort of breaking stuff on your way, and which was like a pure form of video game fun almost. And it feels like this is almost too close to the knuckle, right? Like it's almost too close to the fact that electric cars are coming and like environmental hazards.
Interestingly, presumably it'll have electric cars in it because they will feel very different to any of the petrol ones.
Right. I've not seen any so far. I'll play for a while.
Interesting. Yeah. I bet it does.
Which is interesting, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on maybe it depends how much Tesla pays them.
Yeah, exactly.
To have them in the game, right?
Let's hope they
So-
did.
So yeah, we'll see. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, my personal stance is that also, just to the environments that we live in terms of walking around a place in this, in a town, I think roads and cars have taken too much prominence in just how we kind of walk about our towns, and
Which is why they
They
should all
get
be
right away,
confined to
right?
video games. And so
Yeah,
basically,
they
you
should-
are playing the ideal car. You're driving. There is no better car than the ones that you're driving.
you are the car. You've become the car.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's my big old rant about cars and this particular car game, which I am enjoying. Like, I be honest, like it's very well made and very interesting. I feel like we might have killed Marsh though.
I think he may.
No,
Yeah, he may
not
have
at all.
died. Yeah.
I was going to ask you how it deals with collision, because I remember playing. I don't know which Gran Turismo it was that my flatmate at university had. Must have been one of the early ones. But you could essentially use other vehicles as means of happy deceleration to corner better.
That was fully in effect in the last version.
Definitely still do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you can, I do that all the time in single player. So it's frowned upon in multiplayer. I've not played much multiplayer, but it doesn't seem like there's actual penalties, literally. So yeah, you can just sort of, when you go into a corner like super, super fast, and then you turn on the sticks, and then you sort of like use the car to your left as like a buffer to sort of like carry you through the corner.
Yeah. That's your
Still
Camaro driving style.
Yes, that's the only reason I've got
If
so
I
far in
can't
this
turn,
game.
these cars are going to turn me.
Yes, that completely works. So the penalty is there's a clean racing bonus of
That's the
50%.
one. Yeah.
50% of the amount that you would win for the race is added on if you run a clean race. But you get that currency really easily in the game. So hell yeah, my crappy Camaro that is just like, can only go in one direction and never wants to go in another direction. That's how I've gotten so far in the game, is like, actually, especially with AI, you could just use them as cornering assists, which is not so good. And also it feels as though other games like Forza have dealt with that stuff better. So the thing about vehicle damage, like in these games, is that that's how you regulate that behavior, right? Like you damage the car, and then for the rest of the thing, you've got a broken axle and you can't turn as well. Like that's how other games work. But it feels as though, because the car has to be pristine at all times, and also in the replay, almost an advertisement for that product, they can't really do that. Like, I've not encountered any sort of like damage debuffs, for example, for doing that sort of thing. I've not played any multiplayer yet, but surely it's got to be rife, right? Like, if you've got like an inferior car, the way you deal with that is to just drive into other people and use them to corner, because your car's not going to break down. Like, it feels like an obvious.
Weirdly, I think that there's a part of me that likes me, because I think the thing that comes through to me is like it feels like it expects you to be honourable, which is actually quite beautiful.
It does.
Really. Like, it puts responsibility onto you. Like, you can totally do it, but it's clearly not the right way to do it, and therefore, well, it's on you. Which I quite like that attitude.
That's definitely, you're right. There is a sort of like naive investment in the idea of good sportsmanship, and also just a good loving of cars. I
mean, that's it, isn't it? Like, we can't bear to see a scratch on these things.
So there's that reverence held against. It reminds me of Everybody's Golf, actually. The way it's actually laid out in terms of how you actually access races and things. It's like, it's actually very accessible for what it is, given how tied in it is with the actual manufacturers and the actual cars involved. It does feel like something you can sort of casually engage with. But the the honor system doesn't work on the internet. People are just gonna take the best route through. Like someone's going to min max that Camaro to ram into everything and destroy and just like dislodge every other competitor and then go for the win. But you're right. There is that mentality is definitely part of the game, for better or worse.
I feel really affectionate towards Gran Turismo. I'm not sure why I haven't bought it. It's because I feel I really should play Elden Ring when I'm downstairs.
It's good. You can, if you want to drive, a
Peugeot.
In the rain. That's how the song goes, right?
Tom Petty, yeah.
That's the end of my thoughts on cars for now. Send all of your complaints about cars to no one. I will not be receiving them. I don't know much about cars.
And that, with that car thought, is all we have time for this week. You can hang out with us and our community on our Discord channel. You can find the link at our website, which is crateandcrowbar.com. You can find us on Twitter at Crate and Crowbar. You can also listen to our show and its various spin-offs on YouTube, which you can find at YouTube/Crate and Crowbar. The Crate and Crowbar, which is what you've been listening to, is kindly funded by our Patreon backers. If you'd like to know more about supporting our podcast and our spin-offs and our all the special things we do, you can visit us at our Patreon page, which is patreon.com/crateandcrowbar. All of these links are on our website, which again is www.crateandcrowbar.com. And I'm going to stop saying Crate and Crowbar and merely sign off by saying I've been Alex Wiltshire.
I've been Tom Senior.
I've been Marsh Davis. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening, everybody.